So welcome everyone to our final reading of the day, number 4 in the series of 4, with Andrea Lawlor. My name is Greg Newton. I am the co-founder of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division, along with my partner, Donnie Jokum, who ran out to get a book somewhere else. He'll be back. We're also being helped out by our volunteer, Josie, at the back. Very much, Josie. So the Bureau, for those of you who may not know, is an all-volunteer independent queer bookstore. We have been in existence since 2012, and we've been here at the center since 2014. And if you're not already on our email list and you would like to be, you can sign up for that at the back of the room or on our website, bgsqd.com. And before I introduce Andrea, I wanted to read a land acknowledgement and call for a ceasefire in Gaza. The Bureau acknowledges that our organization operates on the unceded land of the Munsee Lenape. We encourage you to join the Bureau in signing up to make a monthly donation to the American Indian Community Houses Mannahatta Fund. The Mannahatta Fund, according to its website, is an invitation to all settlers and non-native people who wish to acknowledge the legacy of theft and genocide that comprise the history of New York City and the United States. And you can find out more at mannahattafund.org. We also want to recognize that today, April 20th, is the 197th day of Israel's genocidal campaign against the Palestinian people, funded by our tax dollars and enabled by our government's unwavering support. We hope that you will join us in calling for an immediate permanent ceasefire, an end to the siege, and an end to the occupation in order to stop the collective punishment of Palestinians and to ensure the swift delivery of desperately needed food, water, medicine, fuel, and humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. Andrea Lawlor teaches writing at Mount Holyoke College, is the recipient of a 2020 Whiting Award for Fiction and has been awarded fellowships by Lambda Literary and Radar Labs. Their publications include a chapbook, position papers, and a novel, Paul Takes the Form of a Mortal Girl, a 2018 finalist for the Lambda Literary and CLMP Firecracker Awards. Paul, originally published by Rescue Press in 2017, is out now from Vintage Knopf and Picador. Please welcome Andrea Lawlor.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Greg and Bonnie and Josie and everybody at the Bureau, which is my favorite place in New York. Thank you to Sarah Chen for inviting me, and we've spent so much time in this very building together. So it's amazing to be back in the Rainbow Book Fair. It's been also really awesome to hear all these readers today. So that's been amazing. I am going to read like a little tasting menu of selections from the book, and then I'll read some newer work. That's what I'll do. Okay, so what you need to know is it's 1993, and Paul is a queer shapeshifter who lives in Iowa City, Iowa. Okay, I'm going to read a little section where Paul is coming out as a shapeshifter to his best friend, Jane. Paul chafed at this second coming out, at being in again at all, and so suddenly. Is it endless? He thought, like Russian nesting dolls with no tiny solid center. He had begun to read Anne Rice and Octavia Butler books. Maybe he was a vampire or an immortal body snatcher, with the intensity with which he had once read James Baldwin and Edmund White. He checked out stacks of videotapes, The Lost Boys, Cat People, The Company of Wolves, from the public library, looking for something, anything that might speak to his condition. The closest thing he found was Orlando, but Paul wasn't some Count/S who could just instruct the servants in his castle to be cool. He had to think logistically. He'd sensed his own nascent malleability for years, since childhood. At first, he'd assumed all gays were like him and had quietly decided not to mention they could choose. But he had pieced together over time that, without revealing too much, that even to the gays, he was a freak. He was alone in this world. He regarded other gays now with mild condescension. He had gone through the door in the last adventure in Narnia, and they were like poor Susan with her nylons stuck on the train. Although what was wrong with nylons and lipstick and invitations, Paul had not quite worked out. For instance, Jane was a Susan, but she was also his friend, and she'd been starting to suspect something, Paul could tell. He decided to confide in her. Maybe it would feel good. Maybe he could relieve those high wire blasts of relief he'd felt in his previous big gay milestones. And here you will note that I have written a first book, and then when you read from a first book, you have to do things like read through. You have to read things that you put in, like a long footnote, and then you have to awkwardly segue back to the book. So I'm going to do that now. These are the big game milestones. First admission to self at 9 after hearing Richie Spagnoletti call the music teacher Mr. Plummer a queer. First admission to another human being. Freshman year of high school, phone call to the Albany crisis hotline while his parents were out to dinner and Ari was asleep. First admission to an actual friend, Heather Feddersen, senior year of high school. First gay t-shirt, a white shirt with the words "Act Up," which he wore under his uniform button-downs the last month of high school. Or maybe the Keith Haring radiating baby shirt Heather Feddersen brought him back from her weekend in the city, one of the two. First gay book, A Boy's Own Story, snuck read in the Troy Public Library at age 12. First gay friend, Justin Rosenblum, though Paul denied the friendship at the time to anyone who asked. First gay handjob received, abortive, from Justin Rosenblum, junior year of high school in Justin Rosenblum's bedroom with free Nelson Mandela on the record player. First gay handjob given, prematurely concluded, to Justin Rosenblum. Junior year of high school, also in Justin Rosenblum's bedroom with free Nelson Mandela on the record player. First partial blowjob received from Justin Rosenblum 2 weeks before Paul's graduation in the Rosenblum's family's pool house. First blowjob given to Johnny Palazzola, summer after high school, after 3 years of Johnny gay baiting Paul in the woods at the end of the cul-de-sac where Paul lived. First ear piercing, left ear, silver hoop, first weekend at college, 1989. First gay kiss, Justin Rosenblum, homecoming weekend visit to Paul at SUNY Binghamton. Discovery of HQ 76, first year of college, Bartle Library, Binghamton. First group of gay friends. At Binghamton, the motley gang of sincere, pimply, waxy-skinned boys and girls who gathered giddily in each other's dorm rooms for John Waters or Joan Crawford film fests. First gay pride parade, New York, 1991. First official boyfriend, Tony Pinto, New York, July to August, 1991. First anal sex given to Tony Pinto, New York, August, 1991. First anal sex received from Tony Pinto, Iowa City, December, 1991. Now I awkwardly transition. Okay, previous big gay milestones. Maybe if Jane knew, she could help him take better pictures for his zine, Paul thought. Back at Paul's house, Jane smoked a clove cigarette coolly, tapping her ash into one of Christopher's floral print teacups as she watched Paul take off his shirt and unbutton his jeans' first 2 buttons. I've seen you naked, Paul, and it doesn't do anything for me. She sat back on the futon, narrowing her eyes like a stockbroker at a titty bar, and blew a series of spicy smoke rings. Just wait, he said, concentrating. He thumbed his jeans and briefs down to mid-thigh, exposing his pussy to the cold air. His ass clenched a little. Dude, said Jane. You're tucking. Nice tucking. No, Paul said. He pulled his labia apart to expose the shiny red skin, his clit, that extra slitted hole whose name he did not know. Jane, for once, had nothing to say. He extended his finger to Jane's nose. Does that smell like penis to you? Jane sniffed his fingers, frowning. Paul let his concentration lapse, let his clit expand back into cock, his hole close up into taint, his labia drop heavily into nutsack. Jane stared, still completely silent. You can't tell anybody, he said. He patted his package through his briefs, then pulled his jeans back up. Of course not, said Jane. If anyone finds out about this, she'll be a total guinea pig. Paul could practically see the gears turning in her head. She was getting excited about some thought she was having. Yeah, he said emphatically, and that would suck. Paul walked out of his bedroom and rummaged in the refrigerator. He preferred to hang out at Jane's house where there was food. He located a single can of squirt, which he bought for the name. He held it up to Jane and she shook her head. But I actually do want to go to Michigan in August, he said. Don't you want to go with me now? We'll have so much fun. Jane picked up her backpack, heavy with library books she was taking home to keep unopened next to her bed for the next 8 months. She's a graduate student. I'll think about it, she said. I don't want to get my ass kicked by a gang of indigo girls worshiping softball-playing Roper daughters with mullets and fanny packs. They are extremely particular about their woman-only space. We won't get in trouble, said Paul. I'll never know. Jane looked over the top of her sunglasses. Maybe, she said. So then I'm going to read the next little bit, which is, I said I'd do a tasting menu. And so there are sections like this in the book. And then there are these little fairy tales interspersed. And then there are sort of other sections that are more sort of homage to queer writers from the past. But the next little section is more of a fairy tale. And it comes right next. Once upon a time, there was a sweet, darling young wolf who lived alone in the forest and loved pretty things. Now, this wolf was a strange wolf, quite small, maybe part coyote on his mother's side, or maybe his father was a fox, no one knew. The pack had reared him after his mother had died, as the pack does, but he knew they did not mind his absence, found him easier to miss than accommodate. Out on his own, the young wolf had been lonely at first, but also happy to be in the center of such beauty. The wolf loved the little violets that grew in the grass, the dappled sunlight on soft pine needles, the sharp, shiny icicles hanging from the trees, the little thatched cottage where the old human woman lived, maybe even the old human woman herself. He studied her every day, admiring her soft, furless skin like fallen leaves, her silver and red hair, so like his own handsome coat, her raspy bark, how she gestured delicately with her thin little paws. He watched her read her books by the fire, soak in her clawfoot tub, mate occasionally with a bad-smelling woodsman. What did she think about? He wondered. Why did she do the things she did? The young wolf struck up a camaraderie with an old fox who also lived near the cottage. Sometimes the old fox and the young wolf watched the human woman together, with no discussion. Did they love her? Want to eat her? The wolf didn't know. One morning, having gone out of his way to avoid the nasty-smelling woodsman, the wolf found himself near the loud, bland human path through the undergrowth. He snacked on a few blackberries here and there and made one desultory pass at a too-quick rabbit as he wandered pleasurably through the undergrowth. As he neared the path, the wolf smelled something disturbing. Human adolescent commingled with old milk, dead meat, smoke, and yeast. He could hear the blundering human sounds, crunching footsteps, a low song. He crept closer to look, and a child, really a maiden, passed. The maiden was a younger version of the old woman, a sort of pup, draped in a gorgeous, expensive-seeming blood-red cloak. The wolf thought he might like to wear that cloak. He felt mysteriously compelled to reveal himself, but he did not know how to do so without frightening the human maiden, and so stayed hidden. He consulted with his friend the fox. Yes, said the fox. There's more to you than meets the eye, isn't there? I don't know, said the wolf sadly. I don't know what I am. The old fox smiled a dangerous, toothy smile. I will try to teach you. He said, you may learn, you may not. After many days and nights, the young wolf did learn some small measure of the old fox's teaching. When the maiden next came up the human path, the young wolf knew mostly what to do. He revealed himself, and when the maiden went still with fear, the young wolf pounced right into her just like that. The young wolf stroked his furless soft hands, cuddled into the longed-for velvety red cloak, and set off, weak but tall, to meet his beloved old human woman. Okay, and then I'm going to read something from the end of the book that takes place before the beginning of the book. So, not to spoil. And it's largely set in this very building, or thereabouts. Paul remembered staking out the cubbyhole with Tony Pinto because Madonna and Sandra Bernhard had once had a date there in 1987, or kissed or something. Paul remembered staying up late to watch Madonna on David Letterman, never daring to believe anything gay would happen on television. Paul remembered Hudson Street in the rain. Paul remembered the porn store on the corner, looking at Vintage Physique magazine, those long gone men in leopard skins and posing jocks. Paul remembered Tony Pinto making muscles to distract the shopkeeper, while Paul stuffed an old drummer down his pants. Paul remembered 3-packs of old gay porn mags, the good ones on the outside and the crappy third stuffed inside like a grab bag. The newsprint stories and letters signed a reader in San Diego or horny midshipman. Paul remembered Blue Boy, numbers, honcho, freshman. Paul remembered the case of the tape Tony Pinto made for him the second time they met. Tony's scratchy handwriting marking out song titles, original artist in parentheses when the song was a cover. Who said gay men always had beautiful handwriting? Tony Pinto had spent his boyhood rolling six-sided dice and sketching elves, and it showed. Paul remembered bizarre love triangle and a little respect, and there's more to life than boy meets girl. Paul remembered the first Saturday of the month dances at Columbia, crashing the Ivy League, being early, walking around the block 10 times, the Greek diner in Morningside Heights, cheap, bad coffee. Paul remembered coffee breath. Paul remembered C. Howard's violent mints. Paul remembered the night he met Tony Pinto, smoking on the steps of Earl Hall, trying to tell who belonged. Tony Pinto stretching his Gumby arms in a terrible imitation of a Voger. Paul remembered lights up, finding his stashed coat. Paul remembered the meatpacking district, clubs which changed sex according to the night, Click Club Fridays, Meat Saturdays, Jackie 60, same cinder block walls painted black. Paul remembered 4 a.m. bagels with bright pink lox flavored ice cream cheese at the bakery on the corner. Paul remembered the Christopher Street Pier at night, 14-year-old queers in tube tops and short shorts, cigarette cherries reflected in the oily water. Paul remembered saying, how fast they grow up. And Tony Pinto shaking his head ruefully and saying, kids, what are you gonna do? Paul remembered drinking at Max Fish with Tony's straight goth friends from Fordham, walking west for miles with Tony until they hit the water, sitting on broken concrete pylon and kissing for hours, hands down each other's pants, even though Tony had a serious boyfriend of 2 months. Paul remembered the sunburn Tony got at Pride that year, how their older friends carried sunblock. Tony's wounded red-brown chest and back, like a soldier wearing puka beads. Some older lesbian with a crew cut and a squeezed tube of aloe vera, sitting in the shade of the steps of a church, which was really a bar, far enough away from the fray in the shade, laying Tony across his lap so he could think. Tony lay across my lap like a pieta. And Tony's serious boyfriend of 2 months rounding the corner laughing. Paul remembered giving Tony back. Paul remembered sharing grilled cheese sandwiches with Tony and that girl. What was her name? Glynis. Yeah, Glynis with the gay mom from the rap group for gay teens at the center. The 3 of them college kids, older and not from the city, maybe a little too old to be in a rap group, but officially still teens, still youth. Paul remembered the working group he joined because Tony Pinto was joining, meeting at an apartment of a much older gay man with a job and a leather couch and crudité in the living room while they made plans to die in the street. Paul remembered the aching hall of the center, those Monday night meetings in the belly of the whale, the incomprehensible reports from the treatment action group and the meeting's incomprehensible response, which Tony Pinto called the grown-ups fighting. Paul remembered carrying store-bought frozen soup to a man he didn't know with Rena, somewhere in Gramercy, one of those high-rises that made him feel like he was in 1970s Poland, leaving the soup on a dusty kitchen island, feeding the man's tropical fish while Rena changed the sheets on his hospital bed, all the while days of our lives continued as if nothing were different. Paul remembered the men lined up in green plastic chairs at the center, young men with canes and liver spots. Paul remembered the cheery rattle of day of the week pillbox compartments. Paul remembered the smell of orange medicine soap, sulfur and sweet, the gash on his palm from a fruit salad can lid. How was it possible to get a fruit salad injury? Wanting the sliced cherry. The glimmer of fear in the eyes of the receptionist at the center who sent him to the free clinic. Fear of his blood, now contaminating the can. Paul remembered colored condoms. Paul remembered a condom stretching over him like a balloon animal, unlubricated. Tony squeezing 2 free packets of probe. Paul remembered Tony's pockets, his backpack, always full of giveaways and liberated rolls of toilet paper from restaurant bathrooms. Tony stopping in the foyer of every bar to fill up, the top of the cigarette machine, wherever they kept the bowl, Tony collecting condoms in all flavors and brands and colors like baseball cards. His shock and horror at the condom stapled into the Bimbox page, straight acting, straight looking WM seeks same. Not because he didn't agree that self-hating homosexuals should fuck off and die, but because that exact condom was wasted and some proud and out queer might need it. Paul remembered flannel shirts with the sleeves cut off. Paul remembered Tony's black leather motorcycle jacket with its rectangular stickers bragging frequently femme and basically butch. Safe-sex stud in neon green, his black hair shagging over the collar like a Portuguese leaf garret. How is anything ever so smooth as Tony's just slightly too long hair? Paul remembered Tony's serious boyfriend of 2 months, then 3, 4, 5. David, unsuitable David, the waspy Jewish guy who played lacrosse at Andover and loved John Cheever. Older but recognizable to Paul, his easy law school ways, his embarrassing obsession with any dark-skinned man, how he'd settled for Tony Pinto, who was not dark enough, how he cheated on Tony Pinto over and over again, how he'd once at a demo outside St. Patrick's run his index finger down Paul's chest, down to his navel, dipping, then turning away from Paul, who was enraged, flattered, humiliated, and never mentioned it to Tony. Paul remembered asking his friend Jimmy how proud he felt to say his friend Jimmy about Jimmy Batelli, the kindest and most handsome man in ACT UP, an older man who preferred older men, and that he'd allowed himself to be befriended by Paul was a miracle. Paul remembered asking Jimmy Batelli where he'd been, why he'd missed some meeting, and Jimmy shrugging, "Oh, another memorial service, darling, you know." Jimmy turning away from Paul kindly, even in his despair, Paul's relief to be so young. His 19th year a talisman, the word containing the word teen, itself protection from what the older guys, those memorial weary men in their 20s, 30s, 40s, what they were losing. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to segue. As you notice, I'm wearing an ACT UP shirt. So I've been writing a lot of prose poems and then some other stuff too. While I was writing this novel, I was taking poetry workshops and I was realizing that you could finish something because this was taking me like 15 years. And I was like, oh, you can write a poem in an hour and then it's done. It's such a great, enormous relief. And I started writing, of course, my poems are blocks of prose for the most part. And but what I started doing was I realized I had a lot of positions on things. And I thought, what if I could, this was sort of like a proto app. I was like, what if I could just have all my positions in one place and I could refer people to them? So I started a series. There's a chapbook of them that is not actually available anymore. It's called Position Papers, and they're all titled Position Paper and then a word. And I'm going to read a few of them today. I stopped writing them for a while and then I picked back up again recently. So this series is imagining a sort of near future seceded anarchist queer utopian Western Mass where I live. And I think I'll read the first one I wrote, which is cars. Position paper number 1, cars. In my country, we will have modular cars. Each car module will hold one person or a storage unit, and we will snap our modules together or apart. In our modular cars, we will not be lonely driving back from dinner or the reading to the same location after coming to dinner or the reading from different locations. We will have the option of going home together, debriefing on the way, so when we get home, we can go right to bed. And we will save fuel this way, though the fuel will not be precious, will be made of plastic waste. Our modular cars will run on composted Apple IIe's, predictor kits, rainbow barrettes, Palm Pilots, and parts of station wagons, which we will train special bacteria to first eat, then shit out in the form of a paste. Fairly compensated workers with collective bargaining rights will collect this paste, and other fairly compensated workers with collective bargaining rights will turn this paste into fuel, and still other fairly compensated workers with collective bargaining rights will deliver, sell, and insert the fuel, or maybe the workers will come to decisions through a consensus model and will not own so much as share the means of production. In my country, 1/7 the size of the current United States, we will systematically use up all the broken plastic objects people's step-aunts and fathers have been hoarding in their garages. We will thank our hoarding relatives and comrades in our minds as we watch the stars from our downy bed, all talked out. And then, of course, I have a position on police. I'll read that one. Maybe fashion. I don't know. I'll just kind of go in order. Position paper number 10, police. In our new country, we will each take 3 full-year terms responding to trouble situations. Once in youth, once in prime, and once in old age. In youth and old age, we will decide and plan, and in our prime, we will take instructions nicely, remembering perhaps the disastrous and brilliant innovations of our youth, and also piling up ideas for later should our country's future be at all similar to our present. We will cycle in together, young and middle, young and old, and for the first month of our turn, our group will watch and help the exiting group. We will learn from these levers the current map, which rivers prefer to flood, which animals need migration escorts, whose home relationships need witnessing or interruption, which faults will likely soon rumble, which border towns tend to run out of hostile beds and extra food and welcome packets, which embankments the sea most often batters, the most intricate or obscurely renovated apartment building layouts, the rough location of any ongoing imbalances. Before and during our terms, we will study rocks, water, earth, animals, urban planning, computational modeling, shame, panic, mental illness, how to talk kindly to many other people, the brutal histories of the old countries. In our groups, we may choose to take and refine certain roles: brawn, empath, fast thinker, pessimist, prevention teacher, chef, or we may all share all. We will spend our year in the town or neighborhood where we know the most people and where we are the most known, living together in a central whereabouts. Each responder's house will have an elaborate kitchen garden and town stock larder, a departure pole, all manner of hoses, hatchets, patching supplies, sandbags, lifeboats, specialty vehicles, a warren of soundproof therapy and massage and quietness rooms, and at least one dog and 2 cats, plus an animal-free wing for the badly allergic. When chaos reveals itself, as it does and forever will, we will meditate for a short or a long while before we move on. Okay, how about lawns? I think that's a good one. In the country and town of the new country, we will have goats, and for our goats who are also their own goats, we will have varietal and heirloom grasses. And so if we want to have lawns, we will have lawns, and we well might, because of deer ticks, and also to play lawn sports such as badminton or reading or lying about in birthday hammocks, imagining ourselves in the English countryside, re-signifying to our heart's content, as goats eat the variety buffet of grasses, and later we will drink milks and eat cheeses. Goats will eat as they like and stay cozy in sheds in the winter, visited by indifferent neighborhood dogs. When it is very cold, the goats will all come inside via special passage to the wood stove room, and we will watch Grand Illusion or Le Voyage dans la Lune on a projector run on stored up shine from the summer. And when we have used our summer sun, we will take a shift at the gym to turn our high spirits and hard emotions into energy, our quarterback fashion fantasies and stray tufts of anger all into energy. And we will pour that sweat and huff and tempered resentment into battery cells, which we will sled home so we can watch century-old light flicker onto sheets on the straw bale walls, relishing our increased ability to flow blood, cozying among baby goats and humans, and looking out from the bunker or tinted moon to the snow-deep lawn, that various field. So I wrote a bunch of those and then put that out. And then in the summer of 2016, I thought, oh, this is funny. I'll have a position on Donald Trump. Like, that'll be a historical relic. So you see how not prescient I am. Position paper 19, Donald Trump. I really thought this was just going to be like, people would be like, who's Donald Trump? An idiot. Okay, me, I was an idiot. Okay. In our new country, we will notice, cherish, entirely disregard time, inhale hours and exhale days, float and surf and snorkel into the minutes and years, time like a blanket over or under us, wrapped around our beach-chilled skin. Our time will be free of owners, a fact of life on this particular planet, like air and sea, like the moon, like moss or dung or fingernails, like baby deer, like our love, like that song you dreamed last night and forgot this morning. Time will be sovereign to itself alone, but made up of us as much as we are made up of time. We will be time's moving parts, time's tiny turtle spawn, time's tentacles reaching out through the underwater galaxy. How will we rid our countless old earth languages of the ancient metaphors? How will we sift out the good, refusing to spend or borrow or waste or save? Okay. Maybe I'll read 2 more of these, and I think I might be coming up on the end of the. Okay. Gay pride. Should read because we're here. In the new country, we will parade on irregular occasion and in small packs through some adjacent streets at dusk or maybe in the morning light. We will wear elaborate costumes to honor our beloved elders from the old countries or imagine our beloved descendants in future worlds. We will bring with us small wrapped sweets, pretty stones, maybe a few lines of a poem tied up in string, anything shiny. Little stuff we will offer to people we don't recognize and which they will open later. And secret joy, a reminder of the pleasures to be found with strangers. Last summer, a bunch of these amazing young poets that I sometimes am in this writing group with said, let's get the band back together. And so we have been doing this thing where we each have a day of the week and we send 100 words on that day to the others. And it's I think Lauren Berlant was one of the people who made that form kind of popular, hundreds. And we've been doing this for quite a while now. And I'll read a couple of these 100 worders, just a couple. It's great because you don't respond or give feedback. You just sort of like take a word or an image and kind of from the last piece, and then you write into it, and it's lovely. This is position paper number 23, sharks. In the shark's new country, also the shark's old country, sharks will feast on fatty grays, on morsels of sea turtle and smooth long-fin squid, as the land floods and ebbs in moony rhythm. In the eelgrass's country, also the widgeon grass's country, the smallest scuttlers will tickle as they shelter, the oysters will bulk up against the blades, piping plovers will snack on salty worms. We will leave the sharks to their sharking, the grass to its grassing, the seals to their curious parades, watching us watch them as we dance improbably on the shore or break discos on the dusk-cool sand. And then maybe I'll just read this one more, which will kind of bring us to today, because this is pretty recent. Position paper number 30, genocidal theocratic ethno-states. In our new place time, we will remember those ancestor heroes who live streamed from sieges and chanted on streets and rescued strangers from rubble and marched downtown and blocked highways, who ran out for bread and delivered babies in hallways and set broken bones and dug graves, who organized fuel sharing and found water and rocked teenagers to sleep, who sheltered little bodies with their own bodies, who blocked the transactions of the old world, who unbuilt the walls, unbuilt the states, our ancestors who neatly saved bricks, melted down steel, remediated fields, who showed us how to make the new in the shell of the old. Thank you. Okay.
I think we're good. All right. You want to chat with Andrea? She's right here.
Right here? Yeah.
And we have copies of Politics, Form of a Mortal Girl at the back. Please hang out. We have no more events today.
I mean.